Okay, online today for the topic of Alzheimer's and magnesium. Um, there have been studies coming out, or in general on PubMed, talking about the elasticity of the brain, synapto-protective quality of magnesium. Um, and so the high levels of brain magnesium correspond to um, synaptoprotective effect in general, and that's part of how Alzheimer's starts to kind of go awry. Is there is a lack of the structural integrity, so the structural integrity starts to fall apart, and then therefore we start having misconnections, and there's there's and that's the beginning of the Pandora's box of Alzheimer's. So you also have GABA, which is highly dependent on magnesium, and GABA is like a very popular, I guess, trendy kind of neurotransmitter, which is famous for relaxing the brain. And like magnesium, the relaxation molecule or whatever that the dilation and that kind of feature that magnesium has, that flexibility, that kind of non-rigid um, capacity that it has to bond with things, but in a way which is kind of malleable yet strong, yet so all the uptake and the chelation and and bonds are strong, but it has its own malleability. And so that's part of the way in which it interacts in the body, not only through reactions and catalyzation and all these processes of even chelation uptake and conjugation, but also through structural integrity. The structural integrity of the system. I mean, the magnesium is woven into the whole matrix of the system, from the synapses, the nervous system, especially on high. And imagine, I guess you can imagine it like the whole axis, hypothalamus, pituitary axis, or any sort of like even the spinal column, the synapses and all of this kind of nerve ending, spinal matter, high nerve function. These are all high magnesium in their creation and their structure and their regulation and modulation of how they're created and how they're built. I mean, the highest amount of magnesium in the body is in the heart. That's where they find the most of it. So even, all the structures are built in, it's built into all the structure, the tissues especially. So that's why a lot of these magnesium tests don't really hold their weight, the serum level magnesium, because even though that can show some things, like most of the real tests done on magnesium are done in the RCB, I mean, the red blood cells in the skin. So they test the actual blood cells in the skin and not the serum. And so this is a more accurate picture of because magnesium is a deficiency which touches tissues and joints and bones and nerves, and it's a deep level deficiency, and it's a structural deficiency, not just some sort of thing we're supposed to have in the blood that's circulating. I mean, that's important too for the magnetics of the blood and the mineral balance. We know well that it pulls away. Magnesium has a potential, has been proven to stop the agglutination properties of the blood. Basically, it's a natural blood thinner, without the side effects of the synthetic blood thinners that we use. And it used to be used in hypertension. I mean, it was a very well-known remedy before the invention of all of these, synthetics and blockers and beta calcium channel and everything else. It's also a natural calcium channel blocker, which also keeps the cells from dying and becoming too rigid. This also plays into Alzheimer's because of the structure itself being degraded to a point through low level magnesium in the brain. And that being part of a structural imbalance that can be part of a years, 20, 30, 40 years of suboptimal magnesium. That was one of the interesting things about this book on broth that I read. They were talking about a lot of the things that we associate with aging may not be aging. They may also just be wear and tear, which is not replenished. So we think it's wear and tear with aging, right? Boom. But it's not. It's like we're not shoes, we're not objects, we're living things. So there's a recreation of structure and things like that. And so that happens as long as the minerals are there. So the book, I remember the book I was reading, is Sally Fallon's book on broth, and it talked about the threshold of replenishment. So we have to reach that threshold of replenishment in our daily life through drinking the broth or whatever to balance out what we're losing. So if we're gaining, if we have more than what we're losing on a day, more income than outcome or whatever that is, out incoming and than outgoing, then we maintain a homeostasis, or even better, we have more abundance and reserve. So that philosophy plays into everything from magnesium to Alzheimer's, and that those structures being suboptimal multiplied times 20, 30 years, and then we start to have more and more problems. And so, but specifically for Alzheimer's, it's the synaptic breakdown, and that is where all the studies are pointing to magnesium in the role that it creates in these synapses. I kind of picture it as like sparkles in a tissue, like a fabric, or like any sort of what would you call it, nerve tissue or whatever, but you have like these sparkles everywhere. And these sparkles are not only well distributed executive, meaning they're well distributed antibiotic points, which is what minerals are too. Like magnesium is highly antimicrobial, like salt or whatever, antibiotic, not biotic, sorry, antimicrobial, and acts as a natural antibiotic to a certain degree, and it allows, I don't like that term, antibiotic. So it acts as a natural antimicrobial, and so it's well distributed. So as soon as you pull that well distribution out and you take that out, and then you have a lower sparkle effect, it's just like a few sparkles here and there, but that's it. Then guess what happens? The rest of the systems of the body have to go on overdrive, because they're like, we don't have as much well distributed immune system, so we have to create our own immune system here. And so there's a wasting of energy to create lots of neutrophils and endothelial cells and macrophage and all these things. And so you have this same sort of reality happening where you're wasting energy, and where you could have a strategic system, which is much smarter, much more sharpened when it needs to be, and soft when it needs to be, whatever, but it's not just on alert. And so this is one of the ways that we subvert the energy that would have been used for creation or tissues and structures and things like that. So it sounds like I'm just going all over the place, but there's this structural thing is we could spend hours doing a million studies, but the base of it would still be something close to this, and how these interactions, this high level of magnesium in the body, the number one deficiency in the world, needs to be addressed for Alzheimer's. I mean, you have other things like how the cells that destroy the brain, the anarchic prolific cells that destroy the brain and create more advanced progression towards Alzheimer's. They are also dependent on ATP at the cellular level, and the ketone bodies through keto diet and some of this like MTC, but I don't even want to use MTC, medium chain MCT, medium chain triglycerides. I'd rather just say high prognanolone coconut oil, like in its most pristine state, which has all of its stuff retained, the best and most expensive coconut oil you can find, which hasn't been removed and refined, so that you can just have MCT oil on the side, and then they sell the monolaurin or whatever apart for cosmetics or whatever, but you have the real retained. So that would be a great product too for the Alzheimer's, to take many spoons a day. And what it does is the body becomes fat adapted if there's enough vitality, and that allows for the person to give to the cells energy through the ketone bodies, which are burned off through into what is it? It's a glycogen. It's a form of sugar out of the fat that's taken, and that those bodies can feed the cells without feeding the Alzheimer's, and so that throws them off. And so that's this whole magic about the brain. I mean, cholesterol also protects the brain. We know that. So having foods that are low in cholesterol is also not very intelligent, and that's part of this paradigm. butter and egg yolks from soy-free egg yolks and butter and liver, and a lot of these foods have to come back into to fashion here, because this is one of the key elements too for Alzheimer's. But magnesium is going to play a key role in the structural and the tissular level of it. And you have to get it covered anyway, this deficiency, especially with age, because people with age have a hard time extracting magnesium from the food they eat. And so this is why the old world, Roman, Greek times, these, especially the aged, but even the young as well, they would go to these special mineral-rich waters and baths and of antiquity, and they would bathe in them, and there was health benefits. And they still use that in France. You can still go to a doctor and he can recommend that for rheumatism or whatever. So there's still a reality there. And so we got to come back to that, because the skin is going to be a saving organ in the sense that it can absorb in a ubiquitous way as a filter and a redistribution vehicle this magnesium, whereas on the internal side, it's much harder to extract and convert it into energy with age. So that's going to be another key feature. So we always recommend the Transdermal Magnesium, glass bottles, Zechstein Inside brand with the logo. If it doesn't have the logo, it doesn't say Zechstein Inside on it, don't trust it. There's plenty of fake Zechstein out there called Ancient this, Genuine that, True Zechstein, whatever. If it doesn't have the logo, it's not from the city called Vindam in Holland, which is the unique and only source from where this comes. And why that's important is because if it doesn't come from there, it's not natural state bischofite stone, which is natural state magnesium chloride. And so therefore they have to use other chalk and magnesium that's found in other strata, and they have to solvent extract it to remove all these potassium, it's called upgrading, and also heavy metals. They have to remove a lot of other stuff from it to get you that base product back to you. And then they also they use plastic bottles. It's imported from Asia, usually from Tibetan exploitation. It's a whole nightmare. If you've ever seen these actual sites where they find this stuff, and they dig for asbestos and everything else down there. So the best thing to do is to find the right stuff at theheartoftradition.com. It's only $3 a week. It's not expensive. You just have to know about it in blue glass bottles. Thank you, and hopefully this can help somebody. That's the point. I'm a naturopath. I'm doing my best to help people find at least the biggest deficiency. Start there and go on, work your way on down to the other ones. And if you can cover them correctly, not through what we've been told how to cover them, you can follow other podcasts that we have on the subject. Through sacred foods and a little bit of modern wisdom added to that, you can overcome a lot of things, and also start troubleshooting what's happening. You can't troubleshoot if you're deficient, so you got to start there. Thanks.